This is Jim MacKay on News Talk 99.7 WNTK, News Talk 98.9. And 1490 WUVR. And it's an honor to be joined right now by junior Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, and, of course, the son of presidential candidate Dr. Paul. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Jim.
Let's start off with one question. A lot of independent voters in New Hampshire, a lot of libertarians in New Hampshire. Clearly, you and your father kind of lean toward the libertarian part of the Republican Party. You feel at home when you come to New Hampshire and meet people?
Absolutely. I think people up here kind of want to be left alone. I think they don't want somebody coming in and counting how many guns they have in their house. They don't even require seatbelts up here, is my understanding. So I think the live free or die state is a state that also is a leave me alone state, and I think it fits right in with my father's philosophy.
And there was a political article that came out this morning. I was just reading it before we hopped live on the air at 10 o'clock, and you said that your father, Dr. Paul, could pull off an upset if the independents show out and they stay true to their vote. Do you think that could happen?
That and a big snowstorm. So a big snowstorm and a big independent turnout. No, we're polling a solid second, which is a huge increase in votes from 2008. Shows that Ron Paul's solidly in the top tier. And really that this is really a two-way race. There's only, other than Ron Paul, Governor Romney's the only one that has his name on all the ballots, who has enough money to run a national campaign, who has a national following. So, some of these other people aren't even on the ballot. They're not even going to contest large states like Virginia and Illinois. So I think if we get a strong second here, gives us a big boost going into South Carolina, and then we'll see if we can go mano a mano with the governor.
And the thing I love most about your father is he has been consistent for I don't know how many decades now, and people talk about being a consistent conservative, and they're looking for that consistent conservative. I don't see how people can look past your father when they say they're looking for a consistent conservative. And I just wanted to ask you, why do you think the time is now where he's finally catching on to the point where he can go up against a guy like Mitt Romney and potentially win this thing?
I think when you run for president, a lot of people have to know your name. Virtually everyone has to know your name, so then they believe that you can win. When he ran in 2008, 1 or 2% of the people knew his name when he started. Now, he developed a name for himself, and his name became well-known, but now he started the campaign with a well-known, big name recognition, and the ability to raise a lot of money from small donors. He has 150,000 donors, a lot of them online, a lot of energy from the youth, and also, you're right, that consistent record that whereas many people on the stage say, I'm a Reagan conservative, but they voted to double the size of the Department of Education. They voted to expand Medicare in the largest expansion since the Great Society. Reagan would be rolling over in his grave if he saw that, yeah. Whereas Ron Paul's opposed all of these new big government programs. And so I think the consistency, his voting record, the fact that he's never voted for any budget that's not balanced, that he's the only one on the stage that has a plan to balance the budget, all of this appeals, and if we can consolidate that conservative vote, I think we could be a real threat.
We're joined by junior Kentucky Senator Rand Paul here on our special coverage on WNTK and WUVR, live from Radio Row here in Manchester, New Hampshire. And Senator Paul, there's a word that other of the candidates, some of whom have dropped out now, they call your father's foreign policy dangerous. And there's a lot of dangerous things going on right now in the Middle East. In fact, a person I went to high school with that was a year older than me that I knew, his name was Tim Steele down in Massachusetts, just died. A graduate of West Point Academy, had a bright, long future ahead of him. I was a great American and a great person, and died from a roadside bomb, a random attack. And you see these things happen more and more. And the things I hear coming out of your father's mouth, I'm 25 years old. I'm one of those younger people that may be voting for your father. And I agree with his support for maybe ending these wars possibly. And, it's interesting because he has the most funding from active military members. With that support from the military, the people that are going over the server, the people that are putting their lives on the line, why would other candidates call him dangerous?
Well, I think what's really interesting is that when I talk to young soldiers, like I have two big bases in my state, Fort Campbell and Fort Knox, and I'll ask the soldiers when they go off, I know it's your duty, and you're doing your duty to protect your country, and you have to take orders. But if you were making the decisions, if you were able to decide and tell me, because I get to help make the decisions, do you think that we should still be patrolling every village in Afghanistan, or should the Afghan soldiers be patrolling their own streets and their own villages after 10 years? These young people who have volunteered and who are going to Afghanistan and do not question, and nobody can question their patriotism, they still want there to be a transition towards the Afghans doing it. These are the people who fight our wars for us, young American men and women who are brave and proud of their country, but they also don't want to do it forever. Some of them have been there 4 and 5 times. We have a young man who's a real war hero in a town next to mine who lost 3 limbs, and we're working on building him a house. But we need to think that when we go to war unified. We should declare war. Ron Paul's the only one saying what the Constitution really mandates, that Congress declares war. The president doesn't willy-nilly decide to go to war unless it's an imminent threat. We do acknowledge the president should be able to defend us in nuclear war or missiles or planes coming in to make an immediate decision. But the decision to take a nation to war is something that should be debated in Congress and passed by Congress.
If your father's elected president, what can he do? I mean, it's such a large problem to tackle, and there's so many different. I mean, it's hard to give one basic answer, but what can he do to work on our foreign policy so we're not, like he always says, we're stretched too thin? How can he shrink that down and make us more effective in our national defense and our foreign policy?
Well, I think the president does get to make some of those decisions on troop deployment. Some of it's done by Congress, but the president gets to make some of those decisions. I think that if you polled the American people and you said, do you think Japan is rich enough to pay for their national defense now after 50, 60 years? Do you think Germany's rich enough? Do you think South Korea's rich enough? We're borrowing $1.5 trillion a year, and I think a lot of American people, Republican, Democrat, Independent, would say, isn't it about time that we let some of these foreign countries begin to pay? He says he wouldn't, if he were able to win, he wouldn't be king. He wouldn't get to make all the decisions. So you don't win all the battles. But I think there are people both on the left and the right and in the middle who are willing to listen to someone who's a little more reluctant to go to war. The person you elect and the person you nominate will have their finger on the world's largest nuclear arsenal. You want them to be a reasonable person, not someone who's rash or impetuous and wants to immediately unleash our nuclear arsenal. We survived 40 years of the Cold War not by being impetuous, not by saying, oh, Russia's doing this, let's bomb the heck out of them. We did it through containing them, through having a rational and reasonable foreign policy. And now we're the world's dominant power. We still need to have a little bit of that restraint.
And I know you're short on time here. I just want to ask you one more question. We have, I know, a loyal supporter of yours. His name is Brian from Grafton. And he has a question. We've seen a large decline in money from government projects through energy improvement. What, if anything, are you going to do about the need for alternative energy moving forward? Obviously that was for your...
Well, I think what we need to do for alternative energy and for energy of all sorts in our country is free it up for production. Free up oil for production. Over 50% of our coastline is forbidden from oil, and yet we say, oh, Brazil, you drill offshore and send your oil up here. Or we say to England, you drill in North Sea and send it up here. So really we need to be more realistic about allowing things like that to occur. There's a lot of Alaska. You can drill for oil in a safe and clean fashion. There's no reason. Nobody wants to destroy the environment. Nobody wants unpleasant things to happen in the environment. No one wants oil spills. But I think we can produce oil and natural gas in our country and do it in a safe fashion. But right now we have so many rules that we're squashing it, and as a consequence we have to import